and for example, about the ethnicity and mobility, and a reader in urban sociology, and also he already published India beyond India. Uh, Ladies and gentlemen, now we are going to the discussion, and I will give time for Professor Bud to present or to share his paper on diaspora. Professor Bud, the floor is
Yeah,
yours.
thank you. Thank you for your kind invitation, Dr. Lamiji. And uh, let me address the very distinguished gathering. Professor Ekati Manauti, uh, the person who connected me and made me to get on to this program along with you. And the director of area studies program, uh, Professor Ganevati Vayandri. And I also, I expect possibly Professor Alberto also to join us. And he said he might join us. And I welcome all the scholars who are working in the area studies and the Institute of Indonesian Institute of Science, LP. It's a wonderful privilege, which I never imagined I could have had it. I've been hearing so much from some of my colleagues who have been um, frequent visitor to Indonesia, heard so much about Indonesia, but this is the first time I'm addressing people in Indonesia and across the globe on a theme which perhaps is very dear to my heart. And, I absolutely, anyone asking me to speak something on diaspora and Indian diaspora, I would never miss the opportunity. And it's a great opportunity for me to know your you have interest in diaspora studies. Your area studies has a number of scholars who are working on that. And today, of course, is a day for understanding, interacting, connecting back with the diaspora where we don't have the connection in case we don't have. What I shall do is, in maybe about 45 minutes, the moderator, please, you have all the control system with you. Please tell me to stop anytime. And, as teachers, we may go on talking, but I shall try to contain within about, say, half an hour to 45 minutes, make a presentation, and we shall have a discussion. And in between, if you wish, you can stop me anytime and make any kind of intervention, and I shall be very happy to, interact with all of you. It's a great opportunity, I must say again, that I had this, I'm going to have this interaction with you for nearly an hour and a half. First, what I shall try to do is the context of diaspora. How does the diasporas emerge?
Namanya sudah, tapi suratnya belum jadi, Pak.
And many of you may be familiar with it, but I may be repeating if you are familiar with it. But I shall try to contextualize the diaspora and then go to the Indian immigration, how Indians have moved out of India to various countries, and the emergence of a diaspora, Indian diaspora thereafter, coming of age of Indian diaspora, because for a very long time, we didn't realize we have a huge population outside India, to the extent, if you can imagine, when we had the first survey of Indian diaspora, way back in 2000 to 2002, this is the phase during which Indian diaspora was surveyed, and we found out the details of Indian diaspora across the globe. It was of the size of the Australian population that time. It was 20 million. You can imagine the magnitude. Of course, we are much dwarfed compared to the Chinese. We are perhaps about half of the Chinese diaspora, and but certainly 20 million was a good substantial population. And when I had interaction with the Australian scholars who are interested in connecting back with the diaspora there, they said our population is 20 million and you have 20 million diaspora outside India. It's a huge population, which we realized much later. So let me first try to contextualize. This is the, let me, how do I go for this next slide? Yeah, the globalization, the context of globalization. We know globalization started way back, perhaps in 17th or 18th century, but 19th and 20th century form a very significant part of migrations that led to the diaspora formations. And we have a very steep transfer of population, capital, technology, media, and every thought and the process of thinking, idea of others emerged during the beginning of the, beginning of the 21st century. So much, unbelievable, because we could have not imagined connecting with each other like this, except for the kind of globalization that has taken place. Now, this globalization has taken place because there is a emergence of technology, communication, particularly of communication, and people started thinking about outsiders, others beyond the borders of a nation state. What I'm reminded of one of the very important concepts which Ronald Robertson has from the University of Pittsburgh had put forward, which he said, there is the world itself gets compressed because of this globalization process. And one of the significant processes of globalization is that the local becomes global and vice versa. What is there with you becomes a part of the whole globe because it transmits, it goes beyond borders of several nation states. And same way, whether it's the Chinese pizza or Italian pizza or a Chinese cuisine, it crosses boundaries across and you'll find every corner of the world having this. So this is the effect of the globalization that we see at the end of the 20th century. And how do the diasporas emerge? People who have been immigrants in different countries almost till 1980s have been always thinking in terms of connecting with their own country, getting the ethnic, all these communities are called as ethnic minority groups, the immigrant communities from different other nations in a country are ethnic minorities. And these ethnic minorities are the people who are tried to be integrated with the nation state where they are located. So the effort is made by both the state as well as the people who go there to connect with the state and be a part of that state, nation state. And it doesn't happen so easily. And I recall some of the important works during those days. Assimilation in American Life by Nathan Glazer and David Moynihan. Assimilation in American Life was a very great work. Everyone thought America will be a melting pot, that every ethnicity will get melted into American culture. It becomes only the American and nothing hyphenated. But then soon they realize the Canadian concept which they were talking about, it's not a melting pot, but a salad bowl of number of varieties of cultures, ethnic groups living together in a salad bowl with well-connected with each other, having a salad bowl. So this was the transformation taking place, and ethnicities raising, connecting, and therefore there's no further integration is thought in terms of into an assimilated life, but an integration with distinct identities. And this is the new norm which developed in 80s and 90s. And soon one of the very distinguished anthropologists who have been much quoted, his article on diaspora, he observes that diasporic language appears to be replacing minority discourse. Till then, we have been talking about how are these minorities, how are they maintaining, how the dynamics between minorities and majority of the population in a country. And that whole dialogue changed. There's a paradigm shift, he said, that into talking on diasporic language. In the sense, people no longer interested further to connect back with their own countries wherever they're settled, but they want to get back to the umbilical cord, back to the places where they migrated to. So the connectivity back home, in the inverted commas, the home which the immigrants had left earlier, that becomes a centrality of interactions, connections, and perhaps the continuity of dialogue. Today, it has come to the much higher forefront because they are acquiring major space in global affairs today. And to that extent, that another great scholar of diaspora studies, Robin Cohen, who was his work on global diaspora is the most popular book, Global Diaspora. So it is here in this book, he says, instead of calling it globalization, why can't we call it as diasporization? Because what is happening under the globalization process is essentially a diasporization. People moving across nations, and once they move out, not necessarily they will go back to their homeland, which initially the diaspora concept began with that idea of returning home. And the concept which came up along with the Jewish migration and the Jewish community slowly got back to a concept wherein you don't return back, but you still are diasporic. The diaspora concept, if you go into the origin of the concept, it emerged, all of us know that it emerged from the Jewish context. They started using diaspora for the first time, and from there we got this concept. And we slowly have adopted the concept in a different way today. So the returning is only a myth. And today, the idea of diaspora essentially is to connect back and you interact with the back home. And this is the way in which diaspora is emerging today. And you will see how diaspora is connecting back home. Again, I may mention that the Jewish case provides you much significant developments in diasporic connectivity, that today, if you look at Israel, the state of Israel is carved out by the diaspora in particular. They had a major role to play in the formation of Israel. And many of the policies, many of the decisions and developments in Israel take place with the help of the diaspora outside, because they said they have a huge diaspora as big as their own population. The population of Jewish diaspora is as big as Israel population. So we have learned quite a bit of them, and we continue with that. The idea of how do I, let me go to the next slide, please. How do, yeah. Yeah, I come to the Indian migration now. The Indians have started migrating past centuries, but we trace Indian immigration to the level wherein Indians still remain Indians in many ways, retain their culture, their ways of life, and special identity of their own. So, India had a huge migration to Indonesia and many of those Southeast Asian countries, if you remember, right from 4th or 5th century onwards, and certainly during the medieval period, during 12th or 13th century, we have a huge migration to the South Asian countries. But then today, you do not find them claiming they are people of Indian origin. You may have the traces of Indian culture, artifacts, and so on, but you do not have the identity articulated that we are Indians. It happens only after the last, for 200 years, those who have immigrated about 200 years ago. The earliest people who have migrated, maybe sometime in 1820s and 30s, are the people who claim that they are the people of Indian origin. They have certain cultural characteristics, racial features, etc., of people of India. So therefore, they retain the Indian identity and continue. So our tracing of Indian diaspora today, if you look at this point of time in the 21st century, is that the people who have emigrated around 1830s to 1920s, this is the first phase of migration which took place under the British rule. And the migration is very, in certain ways, very touching, very pathetic, because they were taken to the places where the slaves were let free, go off from the barracks in those countries where they have been having plantations. Most of the European colonies, British colonies in particular for Indians were taken there as an indentured labor. Indentured labor is a very glorified name for slavery, which has been brought out by a very distinguished historian by name Hugh Tinker, British scholar. He says indentured labor is a new name for slavery. British Christian, the indentured labor, for the slavery they continued to practice in the barracks, and the way in which they treated Indian labor, absolutely, because they wanted Indian labor. Labor was docile, people were hard, hard workers, able-bodied, and they took majority of the men, along with them very limited women, maybe 10 or 20% or 30% women in their ships, and they were transported like cargo to these destinations. The furthest destination started from Mauritius to Trinidad, Guyana, Suriname, and so on, those countries in the Caribbean. They were taken there. They were treated like slaves by the planters. They had no right. Their indenture is a word for a contract. Indenture refers to contract, agreement. These laborers were made to sign something which they didn't know at all. They did, after all, they were not literate. They didn't know the literacy. So they were made to sign the contract which they never understood what it meant. In any case, even if it was meant something reasonable, they wouldn't have followed it. So they were treated as basically slaves. So this continued till around 1920, and today they are celebrating the end of indentured labor centenary now, this year, indentured labor centenary. Now, those people who had migrated during the British period, they are now fourth or fifth generation Indians there. And you find a huge population across in different countries of the Caribbean. Nearest to you is Fiji. Fiji has a large Indian population in next to Australia there. So we have Indians spread all over the globe, and more than today, a population of about 12 to 15 million Indians are across outside who had gone as a part of the indentured labor. That is the first migration we had. The second migration, second wave of migration is migration of the skilled workers. India got independence in 1947, and then on Indians have been free to move across, and so Indians started moving to most of the developing countries. US was the first one to reach out, then to all European countries, Germany, France, Italy, and those European countries, Netherlands. And then you have several other countries where education was available. Indians started moving to seek education first. Indian education system was not well matured enough that time. And so all the scholars who founded India's scientific foundation and technological foundation had their training, education in many of the developed countries, including, of course, Britain. So one of the leading barrister of India, whom we cannot forget, Mahatma Gandhi, also got his barrister training in Britain. So then he came back to India, went to South Africa and so on, which we shall be remembering at the later part of the discussion here. So this is the second wave of migration. And in this second wave, which stretches about 20 to 30 years of time until the developed countries started selective immigration policies, because they tried to see that the migration is not allowed freely. You can't stop migration. I remember one of the leading Indian economists who has been an advisor to some of the British American presidents. A Colombian economist mentioned that you cannot stop migration today. Migration is essential, but then maximum these countries can do is put an embargo on particular type of migration and immigration. So our engineers, doctors, scientists were all allowed to travel till the 1990s. So we have a huge population of Indians, both trained from outside who had come back to India, they also went back, and those who trained in India. By that, during the early phase of India's independence, India gave great significance to education, and especially to technical education and scientific education, medical education, and so on. So we had a huge production of graduates in sciences, in technology, in medicine, and so on. So their first target was to go to these developed countries, because India did not give them that kind of opportunity, the salaries, environment. So they decided to move to these countries. So you have a huge population who moved out of India during the 1950s to 1980s, till there was a further embargo on migration of all the scientists and technologists. And it is the period we call it as brain drain. I think many of our countries, in all developing countries, have to pay heavily for this, because this education is often very highly subsidized. Huge amount of money is paid, and those who are graduates should be back home here to develop your country, but then they find greener pastures and decided to go. And that point of time, we didn't have much of a communication networks. We didn't have much of a video conferencing or sending the data across or talking to each other like the Zoom technologies, which has come up now, which has a very different impact altogether on these people who have immigrated, the valued immigrants who are there, who are building the empires of those countries. Today, if United States is one of those leading countries building a huge economic resources or wealth, the wealth is generated by the immigrants there. America, of course, is a country of immigrants, and the huge amount of wealth is generated by these cream of the developing societies. I'm sure Indonesia has also paid heavily for it, as India has done. And luckily for us now, today, we no longer talk about it as a brain drain. We talk it as a brain gain. We'll talk about it in course of time. The third wave of migration that we had, again, this migration is to the Gulf region, to West Asian countries. I think you also have lost quite a few Indonesians to Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and so on. So UAE and Saudi Arabia, these are the two major countries which has huge Indian immigrants there. Now, these are people who are from the manual labor, domestic workers, to that of engineers, doctors, lawyers, call it all professions, management experts, all professions have moved to the Gulf countries. This is the third wave of migration. of semi-skilled labor professionals to West Asia. And most of them we call as NRIs. NRI stands for non-resident Indians. I'm sure you also must be having a non-resident Indonesian concept there, because people who go, but they cannot be there in those countries. They have to come back to your country back. So those who have gone to West Asia, they have to come back. We had a major problem now when the COVID came up, how to transport them back to our countries, because they didn't have the job. The factories closed, and it was a major crisis to deal with. Government has tried as best as possible to deal with it, but it was a major crisis because they cannot be settled there. They cannot get their citizenship in those countries. If Indians had moved to Europe and to the United States, you have the possibility of getting naturalized there, getting citizenship and naturalized. And if you are valued professional, whether it's technological, medical, or scientific professionals, then you have a space for you there. You become a naturalized citizen in those countries. They need not think of running back home on a crisis like COVID-19. But we did really face very recently a major crisis, which is yet to be resolved. And slowly we are recovering from this kind of a shock. So that is the third wave of migration. And the latest one, which is going on even today, is something which I think there's no end to it. These migrants who go are highly in demand. These are professionals, particularly healthcare workers. They say today also, many people whom I have in contact in a number of countries, they say, Professor Bhatt, if you have somebody connected, having nursing and other professionals there, please recommend. We want many of those. And they will have unending opportunities in those countries. They may get the citizenship sometimes, they may, because many of these countries which are graying, including country like Japan, for instance, the aging population is more, so they need more health workers, volunteers to take care of the old generation. So you have unending need for the healthcare professional, nurses and doctors too, and the management professionals and the software professionals, software engineers. Now that is another development that India has gone through. During the 70s and 80s, India went extensively on technical education. So every Indian province, every state, we call India is divided into 28, 29 states, and each state has its own autonomy and federalism. These are federal provinces. Each state has its own decision to make regarding education, health, and many interventions are carried out by these states. So each state started increasing educational opportunity for younger generation. So you have today a huge professional body of software engineers, medical professionals, and all other forms of engineers and technologists and management professionals, etc. Because during the 70s, particularly 80s and 90s, has been a huge expansion all over the country, which it can export to outside. Today, if you go to places, again, I'm quoting US. US is one of the very, very valued destination to most of the immigrants from India, and more so from the place I am located now. I'm in Hyderabad. In Hyderabad, in Andhra Pradesh, in Telugu-speaking area here, you have a large number of young population trained in the software skills, in medical skills, and so on. So you will find large number of Telugu speaking people. You know, when I visited recently some part of US, I found their visibility was so much. So because of the promotion of education and there is opportunity, they are the first ones to take over the chances they've got. So you have a huge population migrating to these countries. So you'll find young Indian professionals going there. And some of these software professionals, etc., they may get their citizenship in those countries. There's a long queue in the US, for instance, to wait for the green card and getting from the green card to the naturalized citizenship. But still, you'll find a long queue. And Indians are perhaps today the largest crowd flocking American market for employment. So this is the fourth wave of migration that we have. And then we come to the idea of how are these Indians located? What is the magnitude of Indians in different countries? How they are dispersed and how they are rooted in those countries. This is the diaspora. You know, I make a small distinction between diaspora, Indian diaspora, and NRIs, non-resident Indians. Now, non-resident Indians are Indians with their passport. They are Indians, they can vote in India. Government of India is reaching out to people wherever they are dispersed through the Indian embassies, arranging to have a voting system possible for them. They can vote their representatives back home because they may not be able to spend a huge amount of money and come during the time of elections. So there are cases in, Kerala has a huge population in Gulf countries. Kerala is one of the provinces, southern states in India. And Kerala has the largest number of migrants in the Gulf region, Saudi Arabia, in Kuwait and Qatar. In all countries, you have a huge Indian population from Kerala. And they arrange sometimes a plane load of voters to come to Kerala and vote to their party. But it's not a rule, it's an exception. But now India is trying to get the votes from the NRIs, non-resident Indians. Now, these are people who cannot become citizens elsewhere. They have to be sure they will come back home. They invest in India back home here, build their houses here, or many of them leave their families and therefore send their remittances for maintaining their families, education of children, health care of the family, and so on. So a large amount of money comes back to India from the Gulf region because they cannot invest in those countries where they go. They can't invest on a land or property and do it as you can do it in the US. Today, India has about 32 million population. I mentioned about 20 million earlier to just give you an idea about the magnitude comparing it with Australia. Today, it has gone another 10 million from 2000 to 2020. In about 20 years, we have got about 10 million population increased. And we have more than 5 million in about 11 countries. US has the largest number, 4.6 million Indians are located in the US, both NRIs and diaspora, because diaspora people vote there. Now, when the next election takes place, you have a huge population, about 2 million at least, or 2.5 million people who will be voting in American elections. The rest are yet to get their citizenship in case they get fine. Otherwise, they will have to come back to India because US under Trump, you must have also heard about it. There's no easy way to get the citizenship in those countries now. So Indians will have to get back and perhaps will do good for India when they get back. India has to also have its professional back home here. Among the people who have migrated during the British period, we have a large population in Mauritius. Though the real number is about 9.9 million, it's about 900,000 Indians are there in Mauritius. They form about 61%. So that means they are in a majority, rather great majority, I may say, and they form the government. They are in the opposition. They run the state. Governance is mainly by the Indians there. So you have a little India. They say they call it as a little India in nearer South Africa in Mauritius. Guyana had the next largest percentage, about 52%, though it is about 300 million population there. It's a smaller country, so it's the percentage is 39-40. And today you have an Indian president who's ruling, who's governing Guyana. Yeah, Fiji, perhaps you know more about Fiji being a closer country, but then it also has a very huge population, 300 million, and 41% of Fiji is of Indian origin. But then we had a prime minister there, and through coup, he has been dislodged, and they have changed the constitution. And today, I doubt really anytime any Indian can hope to get the charge. Anybody can hope to have Indians to be in the steering wheel of the governance in Fiji, but they are very active. Many of them are active. They are there in the professions, and they are quite visible in the economic field specifically. And Malaysia has again 3 million population. It's a fairly huge population of Indian community there, forming about 7.3%. And perhaps we are not very close. I think we are almost about a million more than the Indonesians in Malaysia. I think Malaysia, you have the largest population in Malaysia too. I think you have the largest diaspora in Malaysia, and then Hong Kong, etc. And then our population is there in South Africa. In Canada, we have about 3%, fairly significant. We have a large number of people in the governance there, in the ministers and members of parliament and so on. Then in the UK too, we have today, if you see in the present day population, we have about 1.5 million Indians there. And it forms about 2.1% of UK's population. You have about 5 persons of Indian origin in the cabinet of UK today, including the Treasury Bank. Treasury is held by an Indian there. And Netherlands has, again, a fairly good population in the European side other than UK, because of Indians who have migrated again to their colonial rulers' country. Dutch people were transported from India to Suriname, and from Suriname, a huge population has gone to Netherlands, and you have a substantial population of Indians in Netherlands. And of course, USA, I mentioned, they are about not yet 1%, they are 0.9%. We have 4.5 million population in the United States. So this is a huge population. How this population can be taken as India's resource has been one of the issues that has been taken up by the India's government sometime in 2000, year 2000. Before that, how did Indians get recognized? Indian diaspora has been there, as mentioned, right from 1820, 1830 onwards. Till India got the independence, their presence was absolutely neglected. Our freedom fighters, including Gandhi, tried to fight for their freedom, fight for their rights, privileges, and so on. And the number of mobilization, British India Parliament formed a number of rules and legislations, but then still their plight was very miserable. The Indian plight in those colonies were very miserable. And they are not recognized. Perhaps even today, they feel marginalized from India. I shall come to that slightly at a later point of time. And maybe if some questions come up, I will, if time permits, I will elaborate it further. So this transition from overseas Indians to Indian diaspora. Now, Indians have been talking about overseas Indians throughout till almost end of the 20th century. We never used the word Indian diaspora. Even today in the government dialogues, they don't call Indian diaspora. It's a common word used by common transactions, but not in official communication. So overseas Indians are those whoever has left India are the overseas, which includes both the diaspora and NRIs. And among the diaspora, there are two groups. I mentioned the first wave and the second wave. These are the two groups. The first wave are the people who have no connectivity back home. They went by ship as cargo. They lost their language. They only knew that they originated from certain provinces of India, whether from central Hindi-speaking areas or Tamil and Telugu-speaking South Indian locations. So they only knew, they didn't know the languages, but they knew that they migrate from these places. So we have been referring to all these people as overseas Indians in a bracketed form, in a common word. Now, among these overseas Indians are the people who have been at the forefront of global revolution, forefront of technological revolution, specifically Indians in the Silicon Valley. Indians in Silicon Valley made their way. Those who migrated after training in India, some of the top Indian educational institutions, we have a very well-known 5 IITs, Indian Institute of Technologies. A graduate with a degree from any of the IITs will get a passport straight away to any country because the education is highly branded. It's very well acclaimed education. So anyone having a degree, technological degree from IIT will not need to have even an interview to be faced. Straight away they will be taken for employment. So we had huge population who have migrated from 60s onwards, and some of them are the leading venture capitalists today in Silicon Valley. So this understanding of their race was realized by 1990s. Till then, they were working hard, making their own place in those countries where they moved. And it's only when India went through certain problems. India had a balance of payment difficulty, didn't have enough foreign exchange. So India needed some kind of amount of resources for foreign exchange. And then Government of India floated some kind of schemes through which we had huge mobilization of resources from Indians outside India. The diaspora contributed immensely to troubleshoot India's situation when India was going through hard times financially. That is one part of it. India realized the huge resource available, huge potential, huge group of well-wishers outside India who are ready to shoulder any support system for India, support India or in any context. So that is one. Second, by 1990s, there were a number of groups which came together and formed global organizations. Indians formed global organization. One of the premier organizations of Indian diaspora is called as Global Organization of People of Indian Origin, GOPIO, Global Organization of People of Indian Origin, New York based. They had a 1989 first conference with more than about 3,000 people gathered in New York from various parts of the globe, and decided to have a organization from themselves, association, to troubleshoot any issues which come up, because Indians have been facing, as minorities everywhere, problems of ethnicity, racial discrimination, and they had to go tough times. So they thought they should have an organization to troubleshoot all this. So they formed a global organization of people of Indian origin in New York. A similar organization also came up in Mauritius, and they also called it as a global organization, people of Indian origin, based in Mauritius, because Mauritius provided a core center for people spread all across Africa, Indians spread across Africa, some including South Africa, Mauritius, and then you have people in the French colonies like Reunion and the number of Seychelles. You have a number of Indians there, so they all decided to have a capital in Mauritius and started a people of Indian origin association in Mauritius. And there has been a great linkage between India and Indian diaspora, both with the motherland. I mentioned M-land there. M-land is motherland. Those who migrated after 60s, they could trace India as a motherland. But people in Trinidad, Guyana, it's not their motherland. You have now a number of Trinidadians or Guyanese in US, in Canada, in Britain, and so on. So for them, it is basically motherland is Trinidad. And for these people, it is an ancestral land. Their great grandparents have migrated from India. So it is the ancestral land, and the location of the ancestral land itself is a major issue for them. Many of them are emotionally connected. They want to find where from their great grandfathers have migrated from India, or grandmothers, because both men and women have migrated. So they want to trace back their roots. And they have no language familiarity. They have no location familiarity. And rooting them back home in India is one of the major tasks and an agenda in diaspora dialogue that we have with the people of Indian origin who migrated during British times. And then those who have migrated later, of course, they have a very vibrant linkage with India back home. They know their homes, they know their relatives are, kith and kin are there. Their language is very fresh with them. Most of the people who have migrated last, say, 70, 80 years from India, they have a close interaction with back home, with the country. So for them, there's no need to reconnect them. They are connected. What is needed is to get them officially connected back with India, which did not happen till 2000. So the advent of blue chip, the advances in transport and communication technologies made people connect with each other much more than anyone. And therefore it's a major transformation which has taken place between India and Indian diaspora because of the technological transformation. So again, I think I have to go to the next slide. Let me see. Yeah. In 2000, by which time India had overcome some of the major crises that India underwent. We had two major crises. One is when India decided to go nuclear in 1997, 98, India conducted nuclear test. The sudden impact was that there were sanctions, and especially from the US and most of the European countries, NATO, everyone said we should not connect with India again. So India was in a great crisis for foreign exchange. We had a number of support from, of course, from the Gulf region and so on. So we could survive the strategy. But then government of India initiated something called as the resurgent bond, India resurgent bond. And this India resurgent bond was to deposit foreign currency, dollars, pounds, or pound sterling, or the German Dutch marks, and they get certain interest for the amount deposited. and fairly huge attractive interest was then. When the global interest was much less, India was ready to pay 7.5% interest on dollars in connection with then the German marks, for instance, they gave about 7% interest to them. For the British, they got 8% interest on pound sterling, and thus there was a huge subscription on the bonds, Indian floated bonds by the government of India, and we could realize more than about $4.5 million to overcome the sanctions from the British, from all the Europeans and Americas following India's nuclear testing. And thus we find a transformation taking place with the India's link with the Indian diaspora. That was a time when we had a very imaginative prime minister who was a foreign minister earlier, one Vajpayee, and he thought we should now, it's too late, but nevertheless we should initiate in official connectivity with the government of with the government of India and the diaspora. So they floated a high-level committee on the Indian diaspora in 2000. It's a committee formulated by the Ministry of External Affairs and approved by the Parliament. And there was a very distinguished lawyer and Indian High Commissioner in Britain, somebody by name L.M. Singhvi. He was the chairperson, and under him about half a dozen bureaucrats and public service MLAs, MPs were included as members of the Parliament. The committee, high-level committee was constituted. They were to go to different countries, find out what is the status of people of Indian origin who migrated much earlier, and the NRIs, NRI diasporas in the countries wherever they are. And what do they expect from India? And what India can expect from them was the mandate to them. They were to submit a report to the Parliament to legislate a new policy initiative. Till then, till 2000, there have been interactions with the diaspora. Families are well connected, those who have migrated after India's independence, but then no government initiative was there to connect with them. Officially, they were not connected. So this policy statement in the Parliament, when it was submitted in 2002, became a very important policy statement towards diaspora to bridge India with the Indian diaspora. This is where I talk about bridging. It's a very solid bridge that India built with about, the policy statement goes about 400 to 500 pages. And I had the privilege of interacting with the whole committee and had a conference with them. And they did acknowledge in the report, if any of you can see the high-level committee report, which is available in the Ministry of External Affairs website, high-level committee report, which is a magnum opus policy statement towards diaspora. This is one of the major policy statements. I think many countries came after this policy to seek support from India's side in terms of how to initiate their dialogue with their diasporas. I remember two countries where I did interact with Armenia. I had the privilege of going to Armenia and discussing about with them how India has initiated dialogue with India's diaspora and also with the Australian diaspora too. The parliamentary committee, one of the leaders of the parliamentary committee who was assigned to deal with the diaspora there got in touch with me, and we had a lot of interactions with each other. So this is how we initiated our dialogue with the diaspora. So this is something which is the most significant transformation in India's dialogue with the diaspora. First few things they initiated. The first was the Pravasi Bharatiya Divas. In a short form, we call it as PBD, Pravasi Bharatiya Divas. The meaning is, it is a diaspora day, Indian Diaspora Day. That is, Pravasi refers to diaspora, Bharatiya is India, and Divas is day, Pravasi Bharatiya Divas. So the first recommendation, and they decided to start it right from 2003. In 2003, the first Pravasi Bharati Divas was organized, and the day was very significant day for India, 9th of January. The significance of 9th is that it was the day when Gandhiji, Karamchand Gandhiji, returned from South Africa. I may mention that he did not succeed in getting a good job after his barrister's degree from UK. When he returned to India, he is from Gujarat, he went back to Gujarat, and then a Gujarati merchant invited him to, when he didn't have a strong base in India by then, he was invited to go to South Africa by a Muslim entrepreneur in South Africa, and he started his barrister's practice in South Africa. And we say it is in South Africa he became Mahatma. We call him Mahatma Gandhi. His Mahatmahood, the emergence of greatness of Gandhi emerged from his experiments in South Africa, where he came close to the indentured labor, the slaves of Indian community who have been employed by the Britishers there in a number of not only plantations, in railway tracks, in all coal mines, and some in almost all in construction industry, Indians were employed there. And their plight was so miserable, and he started with them and became Mahatma there. So that is the day we celebrate as a Pravasi Day. So initially we had it every year, and now it is once in 2 years that we have the Pravasi Day celebration. So Pravasi Day celebration is done in a great fanfare. The whole government of India machinery is involved in this, and the president, prime minister, and all ministers of the nation are part and parcel of this program. The prime minister inaugurates the Pravasi, but the significance that India has given to this recognition of the diaspora is that prime minister, any prime minister, the prime minister addresses and inaugurates the conference. And the state ministers, state chief ministers, we have federal states, and each state has its own chief minister, and state chief ministers come and address the state conventions there on the second day. And then the third day used to be the final day, during which Pravasi Samman was awarded. Pravasi Samman is awards to the great achievers of Indian diaspora, those diaspora people who have migrated, left India long ago, or maybe even in the recent days, and done something great. They might have won Nobel Prize. They might have been the prime ministers or the presidents of those countries. So they are awarded on the day, when you call this, and provided this Samman. Samman is a great award giving ceremony. They are recognized. 8 to 10 people, distinguished people, are recognized each year by the President of India. So the concluding ceremony is always by the President of India, who awards these distinguished achievers, Pravasi Samman, they call it as. So these are the two major decisions taken and implemented earnestly right from 2003 onwards. And the third was to initiate a separate identity for the diaspora, a diaspora building, Bhavan, they call it as Pravasi Bharatiya Bhavan. Today they also call Pravasi Kendra. They have called it as Pravasi Kendra. It's in a very picturesque location in between the embassies in New Delhi, Pravasi Kendra, where you have Mahatma Gandhi's the digital exhibition on Mahatma Gandhi, and is a place where you have large conferences. There's also guest rooms for the diaspora people who visit India. And so we have a location. And the main idea of this building is not the place as such to connect back, to provide, we call single window dispensation. Any diaspora issue comes up, can be articulated in this location. There will be staff provided by the government. Any problems that diaspora faces can be articulated. Any connection with if they have decision, if they want to start some industry in India, in any part of the country, they can go and discuss it there. They will be provided all the support system. So it's a single window dispensation called Pravasi Bharatiya Bhavan, or Pravasi Kendra, which is again a very central institutional structure provided for interactions with the diaspora. It is here they provide also tracing the roots for those who have lost the roots. People, about more than 10 million people, have no clear idea about where their ancestors migrated from. So therefore they go to those locations, to that bhavan, and seek advice from the people who put them in contacts to go for search for the roots. So this is the third very significant decision taken, and they wanted to have a body like a parliament, like any state's parliament. They wanted a diaspora parliament in India, which has not yet come, and a standing committee of Indian Parliament out of Indian members of Parliament, to have a group which will especially address to the needs of the diaspora in terms of how we link with the diaspora to continuously assess the expectations and what they can do for India. So that has yet to come up. And now the next slide. How do I go? Yeah. Another very serious issue which came up, and a number of countries have succeeded. About 40 to 50 countries are there in the world today who have dual citizenship. They can hold two citizenships at the same point of time. India doesn't allow. Our Citizenship Act of 1955 doesn't allow anyone who has Indian citizenship to accept any other citizenship. If they have to accept American citizenship, they have to give up India's citizenship. And it's not a very simple job to give up citizenship of any country. If your friends have to leave the country and leave the citizenship of your country, it's a very great emotional, it has an emotional impact. Some of my friends were telling me in the US, because people who go to US, mostly they take up American citizenship. They say if they have to meet their parents back home, they have to go to the Indian embassy and get visa and come back to India. So to meet your parents, you have to have all that bureaucratic hassle of going through the visa for collection. So it's very emotional to lose one's nation state where you are born and brought up. So yes, just to mitigate, since the government of India cannot think of, unless there's a complete overhauling of India's Citizenship Act, all that the best they could do was provide something called as Overseas Citizen of India. It's not Citizenship of India, Overseas Citizen of India, OCI card. Now, it provides everything to a foreign national, to a person of Indian origin outside India, doesn't have Indian citizenship, except contesting elections, taking up a government job, to be the prime minister or the member of the parliament in India. They can do everything else. They have all other rights. The Overseas Citizen of India provides all rights except voting and civil services, the government service. All other facilities are provided. So therefore, in all respects, they don't need to go to embassies to get visa. If they get an OCI card, they need not register their name in police stations wherever if they stay for more than 150 days, there is a need to register your name in police stations. No, there's no need for these OCA card holders. They are like any other Indian, buy property except agriculture. Agriculture property is not allowed even to those Indians. I cannot buy agricultural property if I don't prove that I am a farmer or my parents have been farmers. So agricultural property is not allowed to be bought. But the corporates do have certain, they can buy, and possibly anyone outside having a corporation come and buy agricultural property, they can buy plantations. I see a lot of people buying coffee plantations in some parts of the country here in India. So otherwise, they have all rights and privileges. So people of Indian origin get overseas India card, and those who have migrated early, that is British, during the British time, they were given PIO card, people of Indian origin card initially. But today, both are same, both are given people of overseas citizen of India card. So all have the freedom to come to India as Indian citizens, except participating in the elections, electoral process. So, but I think many of our friends in the diaspora, I know, since I've been interacting with the, say, especially global organization of people of Indian origin, and those Indians who are migrated after India's freedom, they say, if we want to invest in India, we should have a right to be in the Parliament of India. So we certainly need to get the full citizenship. OCI is not enough for us. So this is the way in which they are arguing. And I won't be surprised in a couple of years or a decade, they should also be getting their citizenship. And the globe may become free for people to move across with the different citizenships, and you have a large transnational community emerging. So this is the new, the policy decision that the government of India has initiated. As a follow-up further, recently they have taken up something called as Global Initiative for Indian Academic Network. Global Initiative for Indian Academic Network. That is the Ministry of Human Resource Development, that is the Education Ministry of India, has floated a website in which Indians all over the globe can get connected with any of the Indian institution, educational institution. Ministry of Human Resource Development looks after the education in the country. And any educational institution can get Indian outside India into India for a period of, say, few months. If they plan to come here to India for a holiday, they can come here for a holiday and also be connected with the Indian labs or Indian hospitals or Indian research institutions. So there's a clubbing together, connecting together of Indians outside India with India, following this initiative, which is working extensively today. There is a proactive system working under this global initiative for Indian academic network. So any academician, any scientist, whether from NASA or from any other great organization, when they come to India, and after all, Indians will think of visiting India, Indians try to find the niche link and say, why don't you come and give some lecture to our students, our researchers, and our faculty, and so on. So this mutual linkage with each other is being promoted in this. Another very active fellowship which has been promoted is by the Department of Science and Technology. It's a Ministry of Science in India, which has again activated its group to connect with the joint research projects, to promote joint research between Indian and Indian scholars abroad, Indian scholars internationally. So connect with the Indian scholars internationally, and thus get back the idea of brain circulation. So what is happening today from the brain drain, which we are lamenting, from the loss of highly, capital-oriented education system, the IIT students or medical students in India are highly subsidized payment structure they have. They pay much less fee. It's not a market fee. We have private institutions today, but the amount which you pay is perhaps 1/4 of the private one, maybe much less than that. All government institutions even today have very highly subsidized education system in India. And the IITs have been prime institutions of India, which had huge investments done from the government. It was a very prime education system that India, and the people from these institutions have been migrating more. And India certainly was very, not very comfortable with it. And today we are very happy they have migrated because they can be back home with us. They can be connected back home with us. They come back home and they don't come back home empty-handed. They come with the gifts to their kith and kin, but more than that, they bring in their mind all the thoughts and the images that they have developed in those countries. And that is what the brain gained today and through brain circulation. So let me come to the few concluding points. I think I don't know, I have not seen the watch, what's the time I've gone through. I hope the moderator is taking care of it. Please, you may intervene. I have only another 5 minutes to just conclude my presentation. When we talk about diaspora connecting back home, how do they come back home? Indians, when you talk about pan-Indian idea of Indianness, it takes you nowhere. In the sense, we are all people from different parts of the country, forming one country as such. We are Punjabis. I think you might have heard about the Punjabis are one of the prominent languages, and they are very, very adventurous people traveling a lot. Punjabis, people from northern state of Punjab. They speak a language. They have their own ethnic symbols with them. And they have a specific language which I cannot follow because I come from the South Indian Kannada speaking state. I'm currently working in a state which has Telugu as a language. So I'm familiar with these two languages, but other languages I had to learn, which I'm not very familiar. So Punjabis will not think of coming to Hyderabad and establishing an industry or connecting with the people because they will feel quite lost here, fish out of water. Because if they go to Chandigarh, Punjab, they feel more at home. Their kith and kin are in Punjab, and they feel more at home in those places. So you'll find a huge Punjabi population outside India, in Canada in particular, and Britain, and then US. All of them can fly almost every day to Punjab. I mean, that's the kind of achievements those Punjabis have made in those countries. And they've established a large number of philanthropic institutions, educational institutions, sports stadiums including, because Punjabis are known for their sports prowess. And therefore, you have a large number of Punjabis going back to Punjab to establish. So if I say Indians to come back to India, they will come back to the places where they have originally gone from. So the linking in the diaspora connectivity, which is very natural and emotional, is with the place where from they are originally from. So India need to map out where from the Indians have moved out and connect back. If you are enterprising and want to connect back with the Indian diaspora, you have to see which Indian has moved from which part of the country and have a mapping done. And then there are people running. The people who have migrated from different parts of the country will connect back to the country. And thus the linkage has to be established from the region. Some of these states have been very proactive in India. The state where I am located, they have been proactive even in the early 90s. The state had connectivity through their state business organizations to connect back with the Telugu speaking people across the globe. I had attended a number of their meetings. We have something called Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industry. So the Andhra Chamber of Commerce and Industry had invited people from globally from various countries come together, initiated discussions where they can benefit each other. The Indian business people can have business overseas in other countries, and as much as Indians outside India can come and start their industries in India. So Hyderabad has become a huge software destination now. Large number of people who have been working in the Silicon Valley have their companies established in Hyderabad. So this is the natural way in which you can connect. So people from, say, from Kerala would find it more convenient to go back to Kerala. And thus my finding is that the locality, the region has to reach out to the diaspora where from they have migrated. And there's much more linking with each other. It's a natural link. They feel they belong to each other. So for diaspora to make them feel at home is very significant. So anyone initiating a program, it's not a business transaction. It's not just a transaction. It is a connection. It's a link. It is an emotional bonding. Diaspora has a bond, and that bond needs to be generated in terms of where it naturally flows. So my friend Arnold would think of connecting with Goa more than other parts. Of course, other parts of India is as good, but then you are more emotionally connected. You think your ancestors have been part of that place, and you feel whatever cuisine, the way the institution structures are there, you feel they were all experiencing this structure before they left this place. So the connectivity with the diaspora essentially is a bonding that need to be taken extreme care and link with each other. And these linkages go to any extent that they will feel at home, whatever happens in India. So because say emotionally, when something nice happens in India, all Indians all over the globe are very happy. India is doing well. If there is some setback in India, when there is a natural calamity, people feel very upset. And people, that locality who have migrated to the other destinations feel much more emotionally upset. So this is the diaspora bond, which need to be very carefully nurtured. With this, I thank all of you, and I'm sure I think I must have taken much more time than I'm allotted to. And if there is any question or any observation, I'll be very happy to interact with all of you. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Pat, for the interesting presentation. And from your presentation, we know that the government of India looks like this is more diaspora, Indian is diaspora, and we are Indonesian government now is trying to how to strengthen the Indonesian role in the Indonesian development. So, ladies and gentlemen, now we are going to the discussion. If there are from you have a question or comments or share or what do you want to say here, just raise hand or you can write down your question to the chat room, please. Anybody's want? Okay, Professor Yekti, please.
Thank you very much, Professor Bat. It's really interesting to learn a lot from the Indian experience because we also trying to do a research on diaspora. So very, very interesting. So I actually would like to ask you about the, you mentioned about the brain drain before and now it's brain gain. So who actually are they? Of course, the one who have a maybe like academician and also professional, it's very easy. And also people who's doing on IT, it's very easy to do the brain gain because then Indian can get the connection, can get the benefit of them. They can connect it. But how about the unskilled, because you mentioned also that from several waves. So unskilled and semi-skilled, also the migration of them. So how about them? What are the position of them in the scheme of brain circulation or brain gain? And then that's the first question. And the second one is actually, I would like to know about the identity, the Indian identity, the diaspora identity, because like Erickson mentioned about the people from Mauritius and Trinidad, they actually learn from the root from the Indian origin, but then they turn up to be different identity. Some they actually have a position in politics, but some is engaged in the business. So their identity is different, turn up to be different. So maybe you could also explain a little bit about the diaspora identity in maybe like in the US, and also how they actually construct their identity. Thank you so much, Professor Pat.
Thank you, Professor. Yeah, I think we were also quite a bit worried in India for the, say, about 3-4 decades of the last century. That's from 70s onwards. India needed development. India needed doctors. India needed engineers. And we were also producing them in different parts of India, in different institutions. Institutions were slowly coming up. And even those who had gone out of the country, we needed them back home for India's development, to manage its healthcare requirement, as well as for engineering and other requirements. But then, yes, we had to lose them. And it so happened India could not stop them, because India could stop a person if India can give them a better alternative. I'm sure none of our countries, I'm sure Indonesia too, cannot give the same quality of life to the engineers outside, in the developing countries as you have them in, say, US and other countries. India could not. And therefore, we cannot stop them unless government came out with their legislation. No, it was not really advised. So India did not go to stop these people migrating. So Indians left. But then in the long run, what we realized is that it was a thing which has provided us a greater future capital. It's a social capital that we generated by the migration of Indians outside. Now we think they are social capital. They were networking, our connectivity. And today, with the high advancement of especially the communication technology, we could connect back with each other. And transport technology, the flights are so affordable that people can come and go back. So we could have the brain circulated. And even without circulation of the brain, we can have the gain from the brain through the networking. So when I talk to you, what I do is I exchange ideas, I exchange knowledge from you and you from me. So this kind of a communication linkage was not possible in the 70s and 80s. That was a time when we thought it was a really lost brain drain it was. But I think now, since the networking is extensive and there's a goodwill generated, we find, most of the people have their relatives here in India. I will take you to the Silicon Valley. At least half a dozen names are very top names. And if you see, Google has an Indian CEO. Microsoft is Indian CEO. Let me not go on mentioning this, but we don't have to ask them, because for them, India is their part of their heart, their mind, because many of them are born and brought up here, and they have gone there to those countries. So they are good for both the countries. They generate wealth, knowledge to those countries where they've gone to, and also back home, provided their proper opportunities provided. So what is needed is, for diaspora connectivity, the state of origin, the country of origin, need to really be proactive, think, because these people are your own people. So the moment you think they are your people and they think they are part of you, I think a major problem is solved. So India didn't have this till 2000. So it's only in 2000 that we have this, a new initiative of a policy which has come up. Till then, there have been transactions, connections, interactions, but not very officially. Now it's an official recognition that India can think of negotiating with the diaspora from a place of strength, and so is from the other side. So that's the answer to the first point. The other, yes, identity, Indian identity. Identity is always in the shaping. It's redefining. Identity doesn't remain static. If I compare, there are one instance I can mention is there are Indians in New York City. I'm more familiar with New York. I've visited a couple of times and have a lot of people from both sides of the diaspora. The diaspora which has gone as NRIs after India's independence, most of them have their identity location in locational identity in New York, a place called Jackson Heights in New York, Queens. And those who have migrated again from our diaspora, from Trinidad, Guyana, from the Caribbean, I call them as diaspora of diaspora, or twice diaspora, or sometimes they also call the double diaspora. Sometimes it has been initially used as twice migrants. They are there again in the Queens, in a place called Richmond Hills. They're about 7 to 10 kilometers distance from one another. And they know they are Indians, people of Indian origin. They have many things in common. If they don't get certain commodities in their locality, they go to the market in the other locality, because each of these communities have created their own ethnic environment of shopping requirements and food requirements and so on. So you have the Indian food available in Richmond Hills, which is Indo-Trinidadian or Indo-Caribbean food, Guyanese food. We have a huge Guyanese population in New York. And if you go to Jackson Heights, you have a Bombay shop from whatever, or a Delhi shop straight away, whatever is made in Delhi. Similar kind of things are available there. So these are two worlds, I say, apart. Jackson Heights and Richmond Hill cannot meet each other except on Diwali Day or on whenever embassy connects them on a India's Independence Day celebration. Otherwise, they are worlds apart. They have Indian identity, both of them, but they differ from one another. I think Indians in the Caribbean have gone far beyond India, and especially those who have migrated to US, they have taken over highly westernized ways of life. Westernized ways of life. When I say this, I'll give you only one small instance, because I can go on for long. Only one very significant instance for any family is marriage. Indians, even today in India, think of marrying with the help of their parents. One of my first batch student is also listening here, and his son is listening here, logged in. I had requested them, they could, if they have time to log in. The parents decide the bride whom they should marry or should not marry. And the meeting could be only after the decision is made that these two, A and B, will marry. Till then, they may not have met, or they might have seen each other in some social function or the other, but never imagined perhaps they will be marrying each other. It's the parental decision, even today. Maybe only about 10%, I won't say even 10% of Indian population is dating and marrying. On the other hand, in Richmond Hill, no parents will make a decision. They'll be also willing to make a decision, but children have to listen to them. Now, the culture has transformed. They are Indians, follow all Indian cultural features, but there are certain changes you find which changes the level of identity and the way in which they have identified themselves in the Caribbean. You see, Indians in the Caribbean formulated their identity in relation to the Afro-Trinidadians or Afro-Ghanaians, since they were huge African population. So they were trying to maintain the Indians together against the African immigrants there. So the identity has emerged very differently there, maintaining certain features, cardinal features of India, but at the same time, they have changed. So this is the change which doesn't allow, one of the closest relationship you can establish is through marriage linkage. So that is something which is not forthcoming between the two groups. Sometimes they may meet each other and finally marry. I also know some instances wherein people from Richmond Hills and Jackson Heights have married, but then it's not the rule. It's not a common practice yet. So the identity transforms itself. So identity is continuously under transformation. And this, I think this is what I hope I have responded to Professor Yakti's query. Anything else I could, please?
Okay, thank you, Prof. But I saw Ibu Kartini raise hands, so please, Ibu Kartini.
Yeah.
First of all, I would like to thank you, Lipi, for holding this event. And then also thank you very much for Professor Chandrasekhar for sharing earlier. My question is, after having been recommended by its LCID, how difficult and how later on how effective are the issuance and the maintenance of the card or OCI card as well as PIO cards. And then nowadays when they are already merged starting 2015, then what organization handling it up to present? Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's one of the problematic issues that has come up to the attention, because these are certain policies made in the legislature, but when it is implemented, it has to be implemented in each embassy, in each country. And when it happens, it is sometimes delegated to some of the agencies. It has come to my notice in the United States. Many people, if they want to get an OIC card, Overseas Indian Citizenship Card, OCI card, they need to produce so many certificates which they may not have. And the result is they feel quite harassed, and to the extent that finally they say, no, we don't want to have it. That bureaucratic issue is there, number one. Number two, the merger of OCI and PIO card is a very major decision, I say. Though for the embassies to handle OCI and different cards would be difficult. To have one maybe a much better idea than those who have the PIO card. PIO card are people who do not have direct link with India. They have to prove from the archaeological, from the archival data available, that they have to prove that great grandparents have migrated from India. They have to provide a certification. India perhaps would have gone more liberally to accept all Indians through their certification that they belong to the person of Indian origin category, provided we didn't have certain political issues all over. Yeah, specifically our major crisis to share with you is the crisis of terrorism in India. Terrorism is something which people will try to find various loopholes and connect back and come back to India. Sorry, in some way, and then get a foothold in India. So India is not that free to allocate the OCI card to the people of Indian origin, those who are migrated. But there are certain ways of certification that going ahead with it. There are quite a few people have got it, but it's a bit difficult task for most people to get the OCI card if they belong to people of Indian origin category. That's those who have migrated way back during the British times. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Professor Bhatt. I saw Mas Calvin raise hand, please. Mas Calvin.
Yeah, thank you. Hello, Professor, and thank
Hello.
you for your very comprehensive explanations. And my name is Calvin, and I assistant to Ambassador Dino Jalal, who is very strong supporter of Indonesian diaspora policy back home here. And I also assigned by him to focus on diaspora. So my question is, first, I would like to applaud Indian government having such a very comprehensive policy and also infrastructure, including the resources. So my question to you, professors, what drives the government so heavily invest to their what drives them? So what motivations? And since when that Indian government in the modern time heavily invest on resources towards its diaspora? That's what my first questions. My second question is how nowadays, in particular to the COVID situations, the government looks the diaspora out there. Is the government's look diaspora as an asset, economic agents, political agents? I just want to see how the perspective of the government today. I think that's my questions. Thank you, professors.
Thank you, Mr. Kelvin. It's a very interesting question. Thank you very much. I'm very happy that one of the embassies is represented here through you. And yes, the government of India spends a huge resource on the Diaspora Day celebrations. But then it's a, as you mentioned, it's an investment in terms of connecting back. It's not so much, it's the new dispensation today thinks it's not a money spent in vain, because it's a connecting back to your own people. There are different ways of looking at it, connecting back with your people. But then these people are not just ordinary people. These people of your nation have gone out and made their own name elsewhere. Not to say that they are economic asset, but they are asset as a human social capital for us. They are our people there managing institutions of great countries. Like, I just mentioned 2 or 3 names that Indian CEOs are in those countries. Now, they think, now we have a huge project proposal which has come up from Google now in India. Google CEO is from India, and we are going to reach every village digitally with the help of the Google projects in India, which means that it's a business proposition. Google also is going to benefit out of it, because India is a huge space where you have lots of opportunities for business. I think no other country will provide you as much business that India can. So it's a mutual, in the sense they feel more at home when they come to India. As well, India also, we feel very comfortable to deal with them, and it's a business as much as an emotional connectivity with each other. So India is spending huge amount of money. Last time when the last Pravasi Day, I remember, was year before in 2019, which was organized in a very large scale, I must tell you, with very elaborate preparations. 3 days of conferencing in a place called Banaras. Banaras is a sacred city in India. Every Indian will think of visiting, when they visit India, visiting Banaras. There's a very well-known temple in Banaras. And so it was a religious pilgrimage for Indians outside India, those who believe in it. And for the others to come to India, and they have the tourism and other facilities provided by the state. Now, their stay is subsidized. The hotels are, free from taxation. Say, every hotel will have a taxation to the government. So the government forgoes the taxes from that. And the people are provided facilities for travel and others, again, a subsidized kind of a transportation. And we were all transported from Sacred City to another location where there was a huge congregation of 10 million people had taken place. They call it a Kumbh Mela in a place called Allahabad. It's about 150 kilometers distance away. And the government spent money and transported them. And then from there to the national capital, to Delhi, for India's Republic Day celebration. 6th January is a Republic Day celebration. So all those who participated in the Pravasi Day were taken to Delhi, and they could go anywhere else after the witnessing of celebration of Republic Day. Now, this is an investment, but then that investment is only as a part of future linkage. Those who have not seen, those will be motivated to come again to India, and thus connecting back. So once you visit India 2-3 times, we'll start thinking more comfortable and find your niche in India, connect back home with your ancestral home or motherland, and this connectivity augurs well. So this is one of the the points to the investment. You're mentioning a huge amount of resources are spent. Your second question is on Calvin. Can you your second question, Calvin? Can I?
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. My second question is related how today's government's looking to the diaspora as an asset, a political,
yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's
particular to the COVID
yeah,
situation.
absolutely. Yeah. See, it is a social capital. I'm again going from the point social capital. Diaspora is a social capital to all. You have Indonesians outside Indonesia, especially in Malaysia or in Gulf countries and so on. These are social capital. They are your well-wishers in every aspect, social, political, cultural too. And looking in from the political point of view, now today we have last week India has been celebrating, at least in diaspora circles here and some of the Ministry of External Affairs circles, that in Suriname, India's person has become the president of Suriname. About 2 months ago, a person of Indian origin is elected as the president of that. Followed by Guyana. Again, it has about 40% of Indians presence there, and they have a president there in Guyana. We narrowly lost the prime minister's position in Trinidad. There was a lady, Kamala. She was prime minister earlier. She lost this time. She didn't make it this time. Narrowly lost that. But it is a political capital too, in the sense they provide India's political support wherever internationally required. I may say India, despite all its national linkages with the countries all over, is not a member of the Security Council. There are only 5 people, which was done in, so after the Second World War, you have this Security Council with veto power. Only 5 countries are there. India, being the largest democracy, with the largest population, perhaps next to China, always I'll say, India doesn't have a say in it. India cannot use a veto power. No, it's a politically required in the international field that India need to be also recognized. Being a large country with the huge population, with the interactions with the international community, needs to be recognized, and it can be done only with the support of all the well-wishers of India outside. So you can't expect anyone better than Indians outside India to be the ambassadors of India to promote India's interest. It's a very important political interest, and follows, of course, with that economic interest too. I mentioned the Guyana, for instance, since I'm very familiar with the Caribbean countries and I've done quite a bit of work and interaction non-Caribbean countries. They're sitting on a huge oil deposit, Guyana. And China is trying their best to go there, capture it. And you have a large number of Indians there. So if India cannot get the benefit out of it, who else should be? So, this is the most conducive situation. So India should be also connected, linking for business with Guyana. And Guyana is going to be a very huge oil-rich country. So in sense, the oil is there. It needs to be now channelized who can to exploit the oil resources and who will come out of it. And now with the Indians being in the governance seat, there is a possibility of India getting a better economic linkages too. So, it's a overall socio-economic, political, and of course, culturally, we support each other, and we get also supported people from outside. So when, in the recent days, you must have heard about India, when you think of a Ram Mandir, there's a temple Rama built in Ayodhya, which is a religious symbol. Now, all these countries have such a great inspiration to think of visiting the place and contributing for the building of the temple. Not that we need money from anybody, but it's a linkage that augurs well for both the countries. So this is how diaspora can be seen, not just as I wouldn't say the people think you can exploit them economically. No, diaspora is very, very intelligent. The people have gone out. They are migrants. Migrant to me is a person who has a huge capability. They move away to a new environment, get exploited by people there, but then they also exploit the situation, come up, they know what to make a choice, and thus they are intelligent. They will not invest in your back home unless they find it viable. They will not come and burn the hard-earned dollars they have. It's a hard-earned money. Their hard-earned money can be only, in a very judicial way you will spend. So investment will be done only if you provide the kind of trust back home in India. So this is very important for any home country to develop trust to the diaspora that they can invest in their country. So, thank you.
Thank you, Professor.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Professor Bat. Thank you, Mr. Calvin. And now, Ibu Dari, please. Do you have a question or want to share?
Yeah, thank you, Pak Lamija. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, we
Okay.
can.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Bhatt, for your enlightened insight on Indian diaspora. I have three questions on you.
Thank you.
Yes, you have already explained about Indian government that the government has already put very serious concern on diaspora, and they have a lot of investment and effort for Indian diaspora. What's about in the state level? In the state level, and they also keen to have a special policy on diaspora, since you also mentioned that when the Indian diaspora want to have a connection, they tend to back to their where they come from, right?
Yeah.
And the second about diaspora bond, I think this is one of the issue now in Indonesia about diaspora bond. Actually, what's the benefit that Indian diaspora can get from the diaspora bond? And the third question is about dual citizenship. It's also become an issue in Indonesia too right now. And in India, I think that the policy has not been proceeded yet too. So actually, what's the problem? Why that the Indian government not proceed the policy on dual citizenship? Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think very interesting questions indeed. Ganavati, thank you very much for the query. Yeah, the diaspora is that at two levels. One is the national level, the policy decisions, etc. I mentioned the policy initiative was taken up by the government of India in 2000. And the policy formulated is for the whole of the country. So whatever decisions they take will be applicable to all the provinces, all the federal states. And the federal states are also, many of them are very active, proactive, I must say, because these states, we call them states, they're the federal provinces, they are the ones who implement many of the legislations which are carried out from the national level, from the central level, from the central government. So the diaspora policies are decided at the national level, but when real implementation of them has to come to the state level, number one. Second, it is the state level who feel more linked to the diaspora. I gave the instance possibly of Kerala. Kerala is a southernmost western southern part of India. Is a small state called Kerala. And there's a huge migration which has taken place because it's one of the places where you have a huge literacy, high literacy in the country, very well trained, educated, and many of them find jobs outside, and which is much more lucrative. So you find a large population of Kerala moving out of the country to the Gulf region, to the US, to all countries. And now they find to connect back with them is much closer than somebody else from India. They can connect to any Indian, but then their connectivity with the people of their own state is much closer. So each region has its own diaspora goodwill from the people who have migrated from there. So it is that which connects people in a very strong bondage with each other. This is where the diaspora need to be connected with each other. The natural connectivity between diaspora and the country, nation, is with the place of origin. This is what I found, and many projects are going on with that, on that basis. So the states also have their own initiative to formulate further rules and regulations or legislation. States have the freedom to further include. I may mention about Punjab. I mentioned again Punjab. These are the two states where we find the role of diaspora very vibrant. In Punjab, for instance, you have the state has reached out to the diaspora saying that if you invest for a project of village development in Punjab, the state will give 75% of the resources and 25% from the diaspora. So if diaspora gives $25 for a village development project, the state will provide $75 then. To that, it's not even just 50. It was earlier, initially it was 50%. Now they have further come down, asking diaspora to involve themselves with the places of their origin. So they have been very successful in connecting back with the diaspora. Punjab has been very successful. So each state can be proactive. And your second question is about diaspora bond. Sorry. About diaspora bond. The diaspora bond will be accepted by the diaspora. They will promote it, provided it's economically viable. You know, it was a time the government of India and the State Bank of India was the one which floated these bonds. India is a primary bank. One of the major banks of India is State Bank of India. It's maintained by the state, the government bank. Now, when they floated the bonds, they were not sure whether they can give back, because you get it in terms of dollars, and you have to give them back in terms of dollars with the interest. Bonds are all with the interest. And it became attractive for them when the interest rate was somewhere closest to 7.5% to 8%. When we floated these bonds in 1998, that is the time when we needed, our problem was sanctions from all the developed countries against our nuclear tests. So we had to give them attractive interest. If they keep their money in American banks or in American any saving scheme, they get only 3 or 4% interest there. Here is interest which is almost double, 1.5 times. And this is the best way and surest way to make investment and get dividends out of it. Getting 7-8% interest was something quite not common those days. So India took a risk and decided to float the bonds with attractive interest rates, and finally succeeded. And they needed to overcome the crisis at that point of time. And gradually India was in a position to get greater investments and foreign direct investment in India's industrial growth, etc. So India was able to absorb it in course of time. So it was a risk taken. So I think the government has to take it as a risk. We are not very sure the bonds can be successful unless they are very attractive. And people may think of your nation, your motherland and so on, but there is a level to which they may do. If it is, say equal, for instance, if the investment is in the US or in Malaysia and in Indonesia, you get the same dividend, then maybe maximum. But you're not very sure whether you'll get that interest back. So they have to have a trust. The diaspora will put their hard-earned money, I'm emphasizing, because migrants' money is very hard-earned money. That hard-earned money will be spent only when they are very sure they realize the dividends out of whatever they make the investment on. So that the second, and third, dual citizenship you mentioned about, there are countries which have gone ahead with the dual citizenship. One of the leading countries is, say, Italy has dual citizenship and perhaps more than that. But the difficulty is the people, the parliamentarians have to accept it. They think diaspora, whatever said and done, their location is outside. They have given up India's citizenship earlier and they're gone out. And if they have to come back to India and become the citizens, they will have best of both worlds. In the sense, they have the double advantage compared to the Indian parliamentarians, possibly. This is my guess. And therefore, Indian parliamentarians will not vote in support of giving dual citizenship unless, all of them are convinced about it. When we allowed some village headship, village, they have elected members of the village. We had some cases in Gujarat and Punjab, their village president being elected from outside, from the diaspora community. But I think it will be a bit long way to think of allowing, but I don't think it's impossible. It may happen because we know the whole European experiment wherein now the collapse of all the boundaries in Europe, you can move anywhere around Europe, except now Britain is coming out of the Brexit. Otherwise, all over Europe, you can move across without bothering about the citizenship. If you're a European, within the European Union, you can work anywhere else than your country. And but I think there's no issue of dual citizenship. Voting rights perhaps are controlled there in Europe too. So the people are very, very cautious in giving voting rights to people outside their group. So I'm not sure whether many countries will open up at all for the dual citizenship. It's a political power today is very important power, and therefore people will try to guard it. So in India too, I see both the sides. I have interacted with a number of leading Indians outside India who are mobilizing to get, they're building up their lobbies in India to have rights of full citizenship, not overseas citizens of India, but it may take time to really make inroads into the parliament. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Bat, and thank you for everyone. Now time is actually time is over, so we have to end this discussion session. But before we end this discussion, I would like to ask Professor Bat to deliver a short closing speech before we end this session. Please, Professor Bat.
Thank you. A most significant word on diaspora, from my experience that I've seen over the couple of years, is that the diaspora is emerging much stronger than what it was earlier. Recently, I read an article from a Sri Lankan scholar that the diaspora wields power today on various international issues, not just political, but economic. And thus, diasporas are having the the edge over their own countries in taking decisions about their own international affairs, internal affairs. Not just, I gave an instance of Israel, and I'm sure in Armenia. I quote this because these are some of the earliest diasporas, and Israel has a huge population, more than the country's population in the diaspora. And Armenia has twice the population of Armenia, more than twice, almost 3 times population of Armenia spread across the globe. They have much less population back home in the country. The experience is that it is the time for the diasporas to emerge as very significant players in global affairs. And they take decisions of the countries from where they come from. They have the advantage of the country where they have made their home, that is the country where they are located today. They are part and parcel of those countries. So they are the main players there, as well as players in the countries of their origin. And thus, in the overall global affairs and international affairs, diasporas are going to take much serious, much important role. And I see the Indians outside India today. Again, repeating what I mentioned, the global leaders in business and in politics come from diaspora. So diaspora has a very significant role to play in days to come. I think with this, I thank you again for a wonderful opportunity that I have this. I thank Ekati for spotting me, to connect me through her teacher. And I also thank Prasad Nold for giving me this great linkage with your LIPI and Center for Area Studies with all scholars there. I look forward to my greater interactions in future with all of you. Thank you very much. I enjoyed this session. Thank you.
Again, thank you, Professor Chandrasekhar Bhatt, for your very fruitful presentation today. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your participation in this discussion, and see you again in the next diaspora discussion series that will be held by Research Center for Art Studies, Indonesian Institute of Sciences. Again, thank you, Professor Bhatt. See you next time.
Thank you.
And also,
Thank you very much. My privilege. And
Yeah.
thank all of you for
Thank
listening patiently. It's a wonderful opportunity for me.
Yeah.
okay, thank you.